The morning light crept slowly across the linoleum floor of the hospital room, stretching its way toward Elena Garcia's bruised face. The air was still, heavy with that sterile smell of disinfectant and silence, the kind that follows chaos. Her eyelids fluttered open. For a second, she didn't know where she was. The last thing she remembered was the sound of glass shattering, the weight of Michael's rage, his voice screaming her name like a curse, and the crash that ended it all. Then, the sirens. The gunshot. Darkness. Now, she was here in a hospital gown, hooked to machines that beeped with life. Her ribs ached when she tried to breathe. One arm was in a sling. A bandage wrapped her forehead. But the pain wasn't what made her heart pound. It was the empty bed beside her. Michael's bed. Empty. Her chest tightened. For a terrifying second, she thought he had escaped. Then, the nurse walked in, a kind-eyed woman in blue scrubs. "Good morning, Mrs. Garcia," she said softly. "Your husband has been transferred to police custody. He's under supervision now. You don't need to worry anymore." Elena's lips parted, but no words came. She wanted to say thank you, or finally, or it's over. But what came out instead was a single tear that slid down her cheek and landed on the white sheet. She looked at the empty bed again and whispered to herself, "He can't hurt me anymore." But even as she said it, part of her didn't quite believe it. After years of living in fear, she had forgotten what peace even felt like. Scene 2. The detectives visit 2 days later. As sunlight spilled through the blinds, Detective Harris stepped into her room. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes weary, and his tone cautious, the tone of a man carrying guilt. "Elena," he said quietly, removing his hat. "I wanted to check on you. How are you holding up?" She didn't answer right away. She just studied him, the same detective who, months earlier, had dismissed her bruises as a misunderstanding between husband and wife. "Alive," she finally said. "That's new." Harris sighed deeply. "We got him. He's facing multiple charges: attempted murder, assault, violation of restraining order, the works. He won't see daylight for a long time." Elena nodded slowly, her voice a whisper. "You didn't believe me before." He lowered his gaze. "No, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was tired, like two people standing in the wreckage of something that could have been prevented. Before leaving, he placed a small card on her bedside table. "This is the number of a victim support group. They can help you start over. You don't have to do this alone anymore." For the first time, someone was offering her something she'd never had: help. Scene 3. The children's visit. 3 days later, the door burst open, and 2 small figures ran toward her: Liam and Isabella. Their laughter, high and trembling with emotion, filled the sterile hospital room like sunlight through clouds. "Mommy," Isabella cried, climbing onto her bed and hugging her tightly. "You scared us." Elena hugged them both, wincing at the pain in her ribs but refusing to let go. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, pressing kisses into their hair. "But Mommy's okay now. I promise." Liam looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Is he gone?" Elena nodded. "He's gone, sweetheart. He can't come near us ever again." Maggie, her best friend, her anchor, stood at the doorway, tears glistening in her eyes. "They've been asking for you every day," she said softly. Elena smiled weakly. "They're all I've ever fought for." Later, after the kids had fallen asleep curled beside her, she looked at them, their small hands, their peaceful breathing, and realized something profound. They were free. And because of them, so was she. Scene 4. The waiting game. Recovery was slow. Physical pain faded faster than the fear. Every creak in the night still made her flinch. Every knock at the door made her pulse spike. But therapy helped. The support group helped. She met other women, teachers, nurses, mothers, all of them survivors of quiet wars fought behind closed doors. They shared stories of police who didn't listen, neighbors who stayed silent, friends who didn't know what to say. And slowly, through their shared pain, she began to heal. By the time the court date arrived, she could finally look in the mirror and see something she hadn't seen in years: strength. Scene 5. The courtroom. The courtroom was cold, solemn, the kind of place where truth finally gets its turn to speak. Michael sat at the defense table in a gray jumpsuit, his wrists cuffed, his eyes empty. For years, he'd controlled every part of her: her voice, her thoughts, her life. But now, he was the one trapped behind walls. When Elena took the stand, her voice shook. But she didn't look away. "I thought love meant forgiveness," she said softly. "I thought staying meant strength. But it wasn't. It was fear. Fear dressed as love, and silence disguised as survival. Today, I choose something different. I choose peace." Michael's lawyer objected. The judge waved him off, and when the verdict came guilty on all counts, the sound of the gavel was the sound of her freedom. 18 years. That's how long he would serve. Elena didn't cheer. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes and whispered. Finally, scene 6. The courthouse steps outside. The sun was setting. The courthouse steps glowed in shades of orange and pink. Maggie waited by the car, her face bright with relief. "You did it," she said. Elena looked back at the courthouse, the symbol of everything she'd endured. "I didn't do it for revenge," she said quietly. "I did it so my kids could grow up unafraid." Maggie smiled softly. "That's not revenge, Elena. That's freedom." They stood there in silence for a moment, watching people pass by, families, couples, strangers laughing. It felt strange to be part of the world again. Strange and beautiful. Scene 7. The letter. Weeks later, Elena received a letter in the mail. No return address. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single page. 3 words. "I'm sorry, Elena." She stared at the words for a long moment. Then she folded the paper neatly, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. Some things didn't need to be answered. Some things didn't need closure, they needed distance. Scene 8. The new beginning. 6 months later, a new house stood at the end of a quiet street. A modest home with blue shutters, a small porch, and a backyard filled with laughter. Elena unpacked boxes labeled Hope, Kitchen, and Memories. She hung up new curtains, filled the kitchen with the smell of pancakes, and set framed photos of Liam and Isabella on the mantel. When she stepped outside, the sun was bright, the wind soft. Her children were chasing butterflies across the lawn, their laughter echoing into the open sky. Elena smiled, her hand resting on her heart. No more locked doors. No more whispered apologies. No more fear. She had survived the storm and built something stronger in its wake. Freedom, she realized, wasn't about forgetting. It was about living anyway. Final scene. The window of light. That night, she stood by her bedroom window, watching the stars. A light breeze drifted through the open glass, carrying the faint sound of her children's laughter from the other room. Elena closed her eyes and whispered, "We made it." For the first time in years, she didn't dream of running. She dreamed of living.